It's time. Silent Hill, released in 1999 as a challenge to Capcom's survival horror series Resident Evil, this game focused more on a psychological horror as opposed to action horror, and did it brilliantly with the sound, lighting, and atmosphere. The first two Silent Hill games are probably my favorite in terms of psychological horror games. The following three was okay. I liked it when it came out. As it was a sequel to the first Silent Hill, 4 to me was disappointing. I had interest in Homecoming, but only played it for a bit. And the more I heard about the others, I had no interest in. I did have interest in Shattered Memories when it first came out, then I saw some of the reviews for it. Released in 2009 for the Wii during December, because what doesn't say Christmas like survival horror, but when it first came out, the reviews were not kind. However, several years later, I had heard some people talk about how this game was actually pretty good. So I decided, how about I take a look at it, and we'll see. Now, I have played this game from beginning to very end. And I can say that without a doubt, for me, personally, this game is not very good. And I'll get into a lot of good details why. I hope this won't be too long. Made by Climax Studios, makers of Silent Hill Origins, and for doing the ports of Warcraft 1 and 2, and also Diablo, so there could be some promise here. Firstly, it's a remake or reimagining of the original Silent Hill. Same basic story. You're Harry Mason, you were driving with your daughter Cheryl, you get into a car crash, you wake to find that she's gone, and go looking for her. The big twist or addition to this one are the therapist sections. He asks you questions, and depending on how you answer, it will affect the game. More on that in a bit. The game is controlled entirely via the Wii nunchuck. You control your direction and the flashlight with the Wii remote. You can move around and such with the control stick. I would have liked to see how combat would have worked with the motion controls. They were really good in Resident Evil 4 on the Wii, specifically the aiming. Aiming, moving, maybe throwing objects or weapons and using melee weapons would have been really interesting. But nope. Also worth noting, this game came out a few years after Resident Evil 4 was ported to the Wii. A lot of interactivity comes when you highlight an object with the flashlight and can then either move what you have around to as a puzzle or open said object, looking for what you need, or what you're supposed to. But these are pretty few and kind of amount to nothing. Items that you find in the game are just either keys for a locked door or a memento item. So this is where the big difference in the Silent Hill remake really comes in. Silent Hill Shattered Memories is no longer really a survival horror game. It's kind of a puzzle story game. There is no combat at all, other than shaking off enemies and just running away from them. So the big thing that people don't like about most current horror titles like Outlast, Slender, Five Nights, and a few others, Shattered Memories kind of started it all. Okay, so now let's talk about the puzzles and the locked doors. These just got pretty redundant. For every locked door, the key for it was often around the corner. Oftentimes, I'd find the key before even getting to the locked door. And as for the puzzles, some are kind of interesting, others are just there. The thing is, in Silent Hill, the puzzles were always related to what was going on in the story. Like the piano puzzle in the school. You are to play a song called A Song of Silent Birds. The hints you are given are the colors of the birds, crows, swans, seagulls, and such, white and black, and if they are high, low, or far ahead. But when I first played this, I didn't know about the biggest hint, the name of the song, that you had to play the silent keys. It really requires you to use your head in order to solve it. As for Shattered Memories, well, they kind of don't make sense. Some do, but not the rest. In the original, you solve puzzles in order to get keys or set items to unlock doors and such. For some of these, like this one, you're in the school again, and there's this art stand. And I need to point this out. There wasn't anything telling me that I could interact with it. Normally there's an arrow over the top of it, but not for this one. Unlike in Silent Hill, where objects stood out that you could grab or read and so on, here, unless it's highlighted, it's just there. Anyway, for example, in the school level, you have these art pieces that you have to move around to match the pictures, and once they are in the correct spots, their shadows will show a number. This is a part of a phone number that you have to call. That's another thing, you use your phone for a lot of puzzles. It's your map, which is kind of clever, so once you dial the number, the door in the back of the class unlocks. This is the one time something like this happens, so it doesn't even continue with that type of thinking. Maybe if it was a combination lock number, that would make sense. There's even a future puzzle that does the same thing, but it uses a lock number. So I realize that I'm jumping around a lot, and I apologize for that. So now let's try and talk about the therapist sections. So, like I said, depending on how you answer his questions, it's meant to affect the game segments and some of the story. The one time I really felt or saw this was during the second segment. He asked me to color this family home picture, and when the game continued, the house I had come to was the same as the one I had colored. Even the characters living there were wearing the same colored clothes I drew, which is kind of cool. But I was only there for about a minute before we had to move on to something else. So, yeah, that felt kind of pointless. So now let's talk about the motion controls. Like I was saying earlier, you use the Wii Remote to point and move your flashlight around, and when you point at a certain object, depending, the controller might vibrate, telling you somehow that this thing is important. And if you take a picture with your phone or walk toward it, all of a sudden, BOOM! This is one of the dumbest and irritating things about this. This is all of what these little things are, just big jump scares with a flash of light and a music sting. My biggest complaint about that is, that's all the game does for its scares, but mainly because there's no real threat at all that follows the scare. The only time you're ever in danger is during the frozen segments and you're chased by these creatures. And that only happens at the end of the level in order to move you from one to the next. So all of these scares are pointless, meaningless, and just really stupid. Mostly because they have no proper build. For instance, here's a good example of a build-up to a jump scare. In the original Silent Hill, in the school, you walk into a locker room and you hear this rattling around. You go and you look and it's just a cat that just jumps out of the locker and runs out into the hallway. Did that cat just get eaten? Later, you're in the hell world again in the locker room. You hear the rattling around again, only this time, the locker is empty. And as you walk away to leave, suddenly, a corpse falls out of this one and right in front of you. That is a good jump scare. But mostly, what does it amount to? Well, you get a text, but it's not related to what's going on currently. It's always something that explains what happened for this situation that you walked in on, but that's all it is. It's not related to the story at all, and so that was what a lot of my frustration was coming from. It was pointless and just there to try and fake scare you. If these were hints to puzzles or at all related to the story, I wouldn't have a problem with this. But they're everywhere, and they provide nothing. Also, is it weird how whenever you receive a phone call or listen to a voice message, there's no audio? Sure, you hear your character talk, but not the other person. I kept on wondering, is that a glitch? Or was that purposely done? Reading through text messages can be very tedious and annoying as well. There's this child's toy puzzle. It's a piano, and you have to play these certain animal keys to unlock the frozen door. And even though I had read the message and tried following it several times, I kept getting it wrong. And when I looked it up, either the hint was backwards or I was somehow reading it wrong. But every time I had to read the hint, which is a voice message by the way, I had to wait for the text every single time. You can't just skip your way through it. I know that might sound nitpicky, but it really got on my nerves. So, I haven't really talked about the levels, and, well, I'll explain why. For a while at first, you're walking through a snow-filled city, mostly, and then you go through a school, a park, but the levels themselves are pretty barren. Aside from the puzzle, they feel kind of like an afterthought. Even some levels that have been staples of the series, the school, the mall, and the hospital aren't used very much. Hell, the hospital you just quickly run through. It feels like the developer said, this doesn't feel like a Silent Hill game. Let's add these staples from the series, but not really do anything with them. For example, in the school, every time I would walk into this classroom, the music would suddenly blare like it was trying to scare me. Why? The game has already established that only with the ice segments, there are no enemies. So, why is it trying to put me in this fake tense state? Game! I don't scare that easily. And if anything, again, this is just annoying. Also, it's worth noting, and I first saw this in the school level, these shadows that appear with the tables, when you look at them closely, they're actually standing on top of the object. I'm not sure how that works, maybe a glitch or programming error, but once I found it, I saw it a lot. Another reason why these levels hold no interest for me is they have no real atmosphere to them. The game never lets you just take in the environment. You're never left alone with just the sound of your own footsteps echoing the halls. There's always this music playing and the random scary music playing, and again with no threats either. Going back to original Silent Hill, walking those school hallways with only your footsteps, the radio blaring some static, and the creepy moans of the ghost children that will stab you in the legs. That shit is creepy and scary and unnerving. Okay, now let's talk about the side characters. First, we have Sybil, the police officer from the first game.
Sir.
First question, why does she have an open shirt in the middle of winter?
There are people in my house.
Mostly, she takes you from your home to another part of the game, and later she reveals a big twist and revelation as well. But more on that later. Next, we have Michelle, who you meet at the school. At first, she's performing a song, and the song is actually really good. So is her singing.
Maybe I didn't treat you quite as good as I should have, and maybe
I was trying to figure out if this was a cover or not, but I guess it's an original song for the game. It's a good song, though. Anyway, she's here for a class reunion, the only person here, though, other than you. Anyway, you tell her that you're looking for your daughter, and she says that she's heard her name, Cheryl Mason, before. And shows you her photo, and it's the same character model of Cheryl from Silent Hill 3. A nice nod to the series, actually. And this is where things continue onward. There is another character that you meet pretty early on in the bar, but you only meet them once, never again, so it doesn't really count. Now, let's talk about the ice segments. God, I hate these. Basically, the world freezes over and you're chased by these monsters. At first, they look like sausages with arms and legs. Apparently, after a lot of choices that you make in the game, their appearance will change to reflect that. As you are chased, you can climb over some obstacles, walls, and run through doors to progress or slow down your pursuers. Also, you can sometimes find a flare in some of the scenes and it will scare or stun the monsters from chasing you, but it only lasts maybe a minute or two. And they only appear in some of these segments. And if you're caught, you have to shake them off by either waving your arms back and forth or push forward or back to get them off of you, depending on where they are. This gets a tad frustrating at times, especially when there are literally a few times when I manage to whack myself in the face or my eye with the wire to the nunchuck. The creatures themselves look a tad creepy and their screaming is pretty alarming. You can also look behind yourself to check how close they are to you. You can also toss objects to impede them, but this doesn't work the way it should. One, you have to be close to the item, usually a shelf, and when you toss it, you then have to hop over it. So, kind of pointless and annoying. Also, if you die, the game is actually quite lenient about where you continue, not wanting to punish you or anything. Instead, you start a step or two back from where you were. Plus, I find it funny that when you fall dead, some of the monsters seem to cuddle around you or put their hand on your shoulder as if they're being like, "Hey, buddy, you okay? It's gonna be alright." I really grew to hate these segments. Until now, these were only used to run from one point to the other, to start the next chapter and introduce a new level. But now in the school, you also have to go around and snap pictures on your phone of some very questionable behavior by teen Cheryl. Creepy and weird. But also, these don't really come to anything. At least it's related to the character, but a character that our protagonist is not his daughter. But obviously she is! But what's annoying about this is how now not only are you being chased, but now you have to grab these photos in these specific sections of the school. At least in these spots, the creatures cannot intrude on you. Thank God. But yeah. Moving on! Michelle here offers to give you a ride to help you, but when you go to grab her keys and come back, she's not there anymore, and been instead replaced by this character, Delilah.
Just practicing my signature. You ready to go?
Oh boy. This character. She's very awkward, creepy, and I'll talk a bit more about why. First off, it's obvious that she has a lot of problems. Not just an alcoholic, but perhaps drugs. And certainly an attitude problem. She's kind of abusive towards Harry, too, but she seems to like him for some reason. Why? I don't know. My biggest problem with her is, well, I've dealt with people like her in my life, so there's that. And is it just me, but she seems like an underage girl, which is really unsettling. And yeah, she's pretty trashy too.
We'll get to Simmons Street and see Cheryl.
Anyway, now we get another phone puzzle, cause who doesn't love those? Flip a certain switch to a particular light and the bridge will work. Yay! Then suddenly the car freezes over, as does Delilah, and falls into the water. Slowly the car begins to fill with water, and slowly I realize I'm not dying, which kind of bothered me. At first I was thinking I need to find a quick way out of the car, since we had a similar scene earlier after first meeting Sybil, and we had to escape her car, though we weren't in any danger. But in this case, there is no escape, or actual need either, because once the car is filled, you don't die. Instead you receive a creepy message on the windows, and then the radio starts trying to blare something at you, and you have to activate it to move on. It really would have made a lot more sense if in this scene you had to escape the car or you were gonna die. You know, maybe try to smash out the window or something, or after the car plunges into the water, the windshield blows out and you get sucked out or something, and then that transitions to the next scene. But no. We next find ourselves in a wheelchair with Sybil, seeming to take us through a hospital, and she's explaining something. And then she freezes over and now we're having to run. So we don't really even get a hospital level. Well, at least they're breaking the convention up. But before the end of it, we get another phone puzzle. I hate these phone puzzles. They're not clever or interesting.
Radio. It's kind of quiet tonight. If you want to hear a tune, just call 555-881, and for the final digit, use the number of the tune you want from our top 10 list. Keep listening. Alchemilla, healing through music. Alchemilla.
A lot of these puzzles, by the way, I had to look up. This one in the hospital, it did have a hint of a poster in the same room, but I didn't see it, so no wonder why it went right over my head and I couldn't figure it out. But at this point, I was just so uninterested that I just didn't care anymore. I was just muscling my way through it. Finally, we get out and we meet our next pointless character, Lisa, from the original. She's a nurse who's been in an accident as well. We help her back to her apartment. Here she provides some temptation as she changes in the other room. Ooh la la.
Time flies.
Anyway, she then comes back and asks you to grab her some yellow pills. I do so and find them in the very first bottle. They are yellow, or at least they are on one side of them. It counts. We have a brief exchange and she passes out. And another scene with a therapist. He starts going on about guilt and gives us an interactive choice. Who is more guilty? The king making his daughter marry a man she does not love and is not interested in, the man who is royalty and wants to marry her, or the daughter for running away from all of it, or the cow that ran her over and killed her. You decide in the comments below. Mostly to me it's a moral decision, and obviously that's what it is. After my choices, the therapist concludes with, the best way to avoid guilt is to never get caught.
I find the best cure for guilt is to never get caught in the first place.
So morals don't play into it at all, huh? Anyway, we leave and then we get a phone call from Lisa saying that she doesn't feel good. We run back and she's dying. How? And Sybil's back, accusing us of murder, though there is obviously no blood on our hands, but as she starts saying that we are apparently not Harry Mason, a new ice segment starts. So, with this revelation, I can already say what's coming, or at least I could have guessed when I was playing it. Anyway, moving along. So now we're being chased, and we end up in the mall, and a new puzzle. This one is okay, but the hint you can only get in the chase segment. You can run back to find said hint to grab a pic of it, manipulate the color so it matches the mascot character, and boom. You can shake the machine to change what the next color will be, which is nice. This just took me so long because I missed the mascot, so it was in a far different spot from where I was. And now we wander around the mall and get another puzzle. This one is also okay. A keypad lock and you use the numbers from these cards as the passcode. And we wander around some more till we come to a movie theater. Oh look, some better games that we could be playing instead! And this right here is the perfect analogy of how Konami feels about their own game series. Then we come to a screening room that plays a video loop of you and your daughter, kind of the same that you see at the start of the game.
I love my daddy.
If this is meant to be scary or unnerving, it really isn't. Again, if there were any other threats, or if this was meant to present a more interesting twisting revelation, this could be unnerving, but it isn't. Some odd voice phone calls and text messages later, we get to our apartment now, where apparently we're married to an aged Delilah.
Where's Cheryl?
Still at the lighthouse, maybe.
Lighthouse?
A flash freeze scene! Only I'm not being chased this time. Just walk out and the apartment is crumbled and now we jump down off this ledge here and fall. I kept wondering if any of the passing windows might have something in them. Not really. The second time, you get still images from the intro again, and that annoying voice. Guys, this isn't scary or unnerving. It's just annoying. Anyway, at the bottom we're at this large room with 2 chairs, light fixtures, and some walls. There appears to be no way out. What you're supposed to do, and dear God if this did not feel incredibly tedious, use the Wii remote to point in a particular direction so it vibrates. And that's where you're supposed to go. Wouldn't it have been better to use your camera to follow a ghost shadow or something instead of this? Because this just felt incredibly random. You first find it in one of the light fixtures, and then you're supposed to follow it. Other than when I looked it up, there's no way to know that's what you're supposed to look for. Anyway, after figuring that out, I'm in a hallway with doors on either side that lead to the same room. That's kind of interesting. In the room is a TV and 3 doors on either side. Ooh! Does the choice you pick matter? No, not really. They all lead the same way. Flash cut to a chase scene! And the game broke. I run through a door and I'm in a dark room, where I can see through some walls and some enemies, but I can't get out. This was not supposed to happen. So I restarted, had to sit through this cutscene again, and make my way back to said room and the chase. So after that, we get a few little puzzle rooms, just trying to find your way past the invisible walls. But just this one, and this really didn't take that long to work through. Mostly if you use your flashlight, you can see the shadows of the walls. We then find ourselves in Cheryl's bedroom, but she's not there. Then Michelle comes back and offers us a ride with her and Mike.
Thank you.
During the ride, they get into what is obviously a long overdue breakup conversation, and then they just leave me here, in the car.
I can't listen to this. I can't do this anymore.
John!
That was a tad awkward. Now sewer level! Briefly. Not much else to say really, and I'll talk about more going on here. You wander around some more, get some phone messages, then find Michelle again, and she's come to terms with her relationship with Mike. Was never really there. You wander around an abandoned fairground, chase what seems like a child's ghost, which could have been interesting, but again, it's just tedious. Then we make our way to the lighthouse when, who do we meet up with again? Delilah. She offers us her boat to use to help us get there.
We'll be at the lighthouse in about 20 minutes.
But first... this scene is just awkward and feels gross. I'm no prude, but Jesus.
I taste sweet, don't I?
Actually, you taste like alcohol, cigarettes, and sadness. And flash freeze! That's a shock to wake up next to. Now we walk on ice to the lighthouse. We get a last phone call from a few people, one of them Delilah asking us to come back, and that she loves you, one from Sybil asking about our precious daughter, and then as the creatures start chasing us again, this time they have to catch you in order to continue. Yeah. Anyway, suddenly everything unfreezes and now we swim. I like this kind of because at the end of it, you feel as exhausted as the character does when you finally reach the beach. Being dragged up by Sybil, oh, and nothing better than taking said cop's gun and to claim you're innocent. Then Sybil tells us Harry has died 18 years ago. And then she lets us go. From here on in, the game is over. Nothing much else to talk about other than this reveal. But since we already should know at this point, the patient seeing the therapist is Cheryl. I really don't like how Harry comes into the room here either. It comes off as cheap to me. And on top of that, it makes no sense. So what, this whole time we've been a ghost?
Cheryl.
I feel the only way the story really would have worked was if we were running around everywhere as Cheryl the entire time, but maybe they thought that was retreading territory from Silent Hill 3 and that it had already been done. But it doesn't work this way. Anyway, Cheryl has to come to terms with the fact that her father is dead and gone and that it wasn't her fault, forgive her mother, and get on with her life. As simple as that. Depending on the choices you make, you get a different ending, so I got the good ending here.
Mom and Dad don't love each other anymore. We both love you. And we always will.
The only other thing of interest to really note here is that depending on what you did and chose in the game, at the end of it, it actually kind of analyzes you. Seems like a pretty good description. What? I am not! I hope. My biggest problem with this game was it was just so boring. And not scary at all. Just tedious and so boring. It's a shame because I love the Silent Hill series. Specifically the first two. And I would love a fresh take. Hell, I would have loved to have seen what they would have done with the version of Silent Hills being made with Hideo Kojima. Sadly, I never even got to play the demo for it, and just the demo alone for that looked solid. But who knows, maybe someday we'll get a spiritual successor. I would hope. Or at least something. Well, anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. See you next time.